Hello, Savannah, and welcome to another edition of Kandily Kesha. I'm so happy to be with you all here on another Monday. It's Monday, Monday, Monday. Let's get the week rolling. Listen, there is a lot going on in the city of Savannah, and I have invited my D1, District 1 representative, the intrepid Mrs. Bernetta Lanier. Let me tell you something about Bernetta Lanier, y'all. Uh, of all of the people who I ran with in 2019, I didn't know many of the candidates. Dietrich Leggett and I actually went to high school together, so I knew him, but had been disconnected for several years. But I got to know Bernetta through her introductions and her stump speeches. And she took us to school almost every single debate. I learned so much from listening to her, and it essentially prepared me once I got on council. So I was most happy to know that I was going to be serving with someone as bright and as intelligent and as studied and committed to community as Miss Lanier. Most people would pair me with Alderwoman Alicia Millen Blakely, my P2, as my sidekick. At the end of the day, we are all committed to community, and it's just really delightful to be able to serve with you, Alderwoman Lanier. And so I asked for you to join me tonight as we start to talk about what I would consider an epidemic in our community with regard to housing. And we throw the terminology around a little bit as it relates to affordable housing, workforce housing, income-based housing, public housing, housing. Nevertheless, we still know that housing in general is at a premium for residents who are most vulnerable in our communities. And so I want you to just open a little bit of giving us your background experience in doing this work and how long you have been dedicating yourself to the first district and where we're going from here.
Thank you, ma'am, Alderwoman Gibson Carter. Thank you for the invitation to chat with you on this evening, and thank you for the introduction. I am also very pleased and proud to be serving with you. You really do have some warriors on council who are looking out for the people. Yes, the housing crisis that we find ourselves in the midst of course, is a national phenomenon. And we are also seeing that here in Savannah. And because we have seen this play out around the country, and you hear terms like gentrification and forced displacement, then here in Savannah, while we see this unfolding in front of us, it was an opportunity for the leadership in Savannah to place some policies in place that will hedge what was bound to happen, which is people being displaced from their homes and homelessness increasing. So we saw this wave coming from around the nation, but Savannah was a little bit protected because the housing prices here were still somewhat affordable until SCAD came in and did the marvelous thing of revitalizing and renovating the downtown. And from what we have seen around the country, then we have seen the cost of housing increase. When those SCAD parents came here to see about their children, they probably said, wow, this is a sale. This is a bargain. This town is on sale. Because when people come from places like New York and California, and they see the prices of the housing here in Savannah at least 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, of course, they probably could have considered those prices cheap. Now, that's economics. It's supply and demand. However, then you see houses that are in proximity to downtown, they become at a premium because people could no longer afford the downtown prices. So if you can't be downtown near the city core, then folks want to be near downtown or just be able to afford being in close proximity so they could live, work, and play in proximity to downtown. And those areas that are close to the downtown in Savannah neighborhoods, that were formulated in the second concentric circle, and that's just outside of downtown. When those neighborhoods, and on the west side, they happen to be old historic African American neighborhoods that have evolved from slave plantations. So the people there were mostly marginalized, low income people, the salt of the earth people, the people who sweat and built Savannah, the people who fed Savannah from sharecroppers. They were sharecroppers, slaves who turned into sharecroppers, who turned into just upstanding citizens who didn't have any bootstraps and still pulled themselves up. But now there's a threat. There's a threat of these neighborhoods. And I'm talking now about the west side, but you could see this also happening and playing out on the east side and somewhat on the south side, as those areas that were once just historic African-American areas are now becoming desirable because of their proximity to downtown. And my history of being a fourth generation resident, and now 5 and 6 generations of people that have lived in this area on the west side, the gentrification was happening more or faster on the east side. And we were watching that because no one wanted to be on the west side. They couldn't even identify the name of the neighborhoods on the west side. But we felt a little protected by that because we know what we had. We knew that location being right next to the port, being right near 516, access to 95, wealth to the east, downtown, wealth to the west with Pooler and those areas coming up, Chatham Parkway coming up, west to the south of us with Southside Savannah, and then the river on the north. So we're here inside of this almost like a bowl, being surrounded by areas of wealth. And those areas not only were wealthy, but the wealth was running over. And when wealth run over, especially from downtown, it had to run somewhere. So it's like a wealth bowl here in the west side, the greater west side. It was, the opportunity should be here. But now that all eyes are on the west side, because downtown, there's a policy called downtown expansion. And that expansion identifies areas on the west side where there was land available. And there's actually a concerted plan to expand downtown into the west side, which is greater West Savannah. And that's what we're experiencing right now. Older woman and housing is being impacted. And the cost of housing is increasing, but the wages and the wealth has not increased. That gap is still there. So that's what
hasn't moved
right now. Yes.
And so to pick up on what you said, in that downtown is moving to the west side, there's a concentrated effort to push development in the west side corridors where no one really ever wanted to touch. But now we see what is happening with Clearview. That's a part of that. Would you describe that as a part of that?
Absolutely. Clearview was built, it was like a shipyard type community to provide houses to those people that worked for the shipyard just there on the river. And after World War II, a lot of soldiers and veterans were moved into the area. There were Caucasians. I just don't want people to think this area has always been just about totally Black like it is now, because it was an area that was maybe 40% Caucasian. And we had actual Native Americans, full-blooded Native Americans that live in these areas. And through the 60s, they sort of left, or either that would be interested to find out what happened to the Native Americans who lived here. But in the 60s, we experienced white flight with school integration. And the whites did not want to go to school with the Blacks, and they moved away, and other Blacks moved in until what we have today, an area that is maybe about 98% African American. And Clearview is one of those areas in the Hudson Hills side of West Bay Street. And the people now who are being displaced, that you probably have seen in the media, you know all about it, those people have lived there for quite some time. In that quiet area.
Some in excess of 20 years.
Absolutely. 20, 25. I think one's been there almost 40 years. A gentleman who will be evicted in the morning. He's a veteran. And so when they were told maybe about almost 3 years ago that a new development was coming, and some people probably prepared or moved away at that time, but there were no dates set. But in August, they were given notices that they would have 60 days to move. And these people, through the pandemic, they weren't the people who were not paying their rent and just trying to build the system. These people, they continued to pay rent through the pandemic. These are what we call the working poor. And but they did not have a reserve to be able to move or find housing that they could afford, because they were paying anywhere from maybe 375 to 675 for rent, because these were old bungalows, concrete block houses, but they were very comfortable living there and in walking distance to downtown. But the people in Clearview, once they received those notices, they thought that they better start trying to save as much as they can for when the day actually came that they were evicted and they needed to find some place. They know they were going to need the first month and the last month rent, and all the things that you need to move, or to rent a U-Haul. Or so some of those people stopped paying their rent because they know they had to leave and they needed to save that money. And that was used against them in order to put the dispossessory warrant was filed against the residents. Of course, you know that we advocated, myself, yourself, Alderwoman Blakely, we advocated to get an extension for them, to get help from our city management, to speak with the developers, to at least give them until the end of the year an opportunity to get themselves together and find a place. And we were promised that that would happen. We were promised that did happen, that they
Right.
did receive that extension. However, they went to court on last week, Monday and Tuesday, and were evicted. And the first eviction occurred today. And the remainder of those evictions will happen on tomorrow.
And
Now,
just last week, per our assistant city manager, myself and Alderwoman Blakely was on the phone. You directed us to go and see about the people in Clearview because they were up in arms. And as we were trying to calm them down and say, no, our assistant city manager says he has information whereby you can stay put until December 31st, but in short order, you get a call from a woman frantic. She drives up with her daughter and her things are on the street today.
yes. Yes, I had to speak to the little girl, the little baby, cute little girl, and she saw all of their items. She goes to Brock School. I had to pull her aside from everyone out there and let her know, baby, this too will pass. And I said, your family will do so well. I said, this is a bump in the road and things happen. Everyone go through. And right now your family is just going through, but you all will be all right. And folks went into their pockets today and they tried to help them because they'll be sleeping in a hotel tonight. And in the morning, they're going to come and look through the rest of the items to see if there's anything else they can salvage. Now, they were able to get some of their items moved into a storage unit, and the organization Black Voters Matters has sent some funds to assist them with the U-Hauls and with storage units. And I believe they will also be assisting some of them with some funds towards first month or last month rent. And Ms. Shamika Simmons is intervening and working on behalf of Black Voters Matter to assist in that area. All the funding that was promised when we were advocating for them, Alderwoman, from the county, from EOA, from the city, none of that transpired. So all of those promises and nothing happened. There was no financial assistance for any of those people. I believe the organization Family Promise, is that correct name? I think they have tried to place some of the people, or maybe they did place a couple. Some people did get placed through the week. And we're really only talking about maybe about 5 households at this point. After the eviction today, I believe maybe 3 or 4 evictions are scheduled in the morning, but that will be the remainder of the people there. So on this evening, we spoke to a woman, and I don't know, it was just so sad because she was acting numb. We said, do you have a plan? No. Have you packed? She said, I've been doing some packing. Do you have funds to get a storage unit? No. So really, she was just sitting there until waiting in the morning for the sheriff department to come and just sit her items out. And so there will be some people coming in the morning to help move her items into a U-Haul truck and try to get those into a storage unit. But it just seemed that she was in some type of, she was just shocked and just, it's really so sad. It is just so sad. It just really tugs at your heart to see people right here, in this Yuletide season, right here before Christmas, being displaced when they really didn't get that promised extension that they needed. Now, the kicker is this: the dispossessory is filed through the court, of course, and becomes a part of their record for 7 years. And there was one gentleman who was secured a place for his family, and he was told to come pick up the key. And when he went to pick up the key, he was told, well, we can't rent you this apartment again because you have a dispossessory on your record. So they did not get that apartment.
Wow.
They're in a hotel. So they can't win. They're already marginalized, and now they're being displaced. And now for 7 years, they'll have a strike on their legal record, and it's going to inhibit them from securing housing.
And and even what's even more sad, this is happening on our watch.
Yes.
Despite how much we advocate, despite how much we bring attention to and awareness of, it's almost as if the powers that be don't really care. Now, our mayor, I'm just going to be frank with you, they are longtime bosom buddies with Sylvester Formey, and I'm going to call names. You don't have to call them. I will call them. He is the local partner to the developer. He is a Savanian. It's my understanding that they forewent the agreement to have the families wait until December 31st because he stated, well, if we give them to December 31st, they're not going to move. So we just need to go ahead and move forward with this. Now, this is an individual who is a legacy partner in relationship to getting projects with the city of Savannah. And to do that in this peace and light season, to do this in this season of Advent, to do this in the season of unity and community camaraderie, it's just awful. And that's what I abhor about the job that we do. We are intertwined with so many evil-spirited people. And it's not a matter of giving to those who don't have or offering up resources where we're these crazy liberals. What we are advocating for is just returning back to people their fair share. Because for far too long, the takers have just had it all. They do not want to share at all. And we saw that happen with the hotel motel tax, where of all the millions of dollars, how much was it? We were looking at 65 million. Was it? I can't remember.
7, close to 7. Yeah, that's correct.
And all we were asking was for a meager $7 million of that to go toward providing some semblance of support to the hospitality workers. We justify and make everything else fit. And so the pieces I find problematic also are consistent with the fact that we are recipients of millions of dollars in relief funds.
Yes.
Where we are supposed to, via ARPA funds, CARES Act funds. Right now, the United Way is in position to receive almost $750,000, just short of $1 million from the city of Savannah. Those are the individuals, the entities that should have boots on the ground, be right there servicing those individuals. This is too little, too late. And so Family Promise, the United Way, they all knew that this day was impending. And so these families should not have been tasked with trying to find these resources at the last minute, because we've already extended resources to these giants that are supposed to go directly to the people. So where do we go from here? We have Weeping Time. The Weeping Time property is one other decision that this council made that's consistent with not having a heart for the people. We now also have on our hands Savannah Cottages, just off of B Road near Victory Drive. It backs into the Truman Parkway. Those residents will soon be displaced, in that we recently learned that the property has been sold to a developer whose plan is to come in, renovate the dilapidated properties. Right now, in my opinion, they're not fit for human habitation. Most of the individuals there have Section 8 vouchers, and I'm not really sure when Section 8 staff stop evaluating properties or going in and doing assessments. But if I'm walking in and there are holes on the floor, holes in the ceiling, rat infested, cats everywhere, like how is it that Earlene Davis just have free reign and she can just do whatever she wants to do? We have people right now in this city with Section 8 vouchers who cannot find a place to stay. They can't get a call back from the housing authority. Stillwell is still hell. One elevator is still working, and we're going on almost 3 months now for a high rise of over 200 seniors, some disabled.
Yes.
And now we have Parkside. Parkside is being threatened by a developer, Wardlaw, who's also a contributor to the mayor's campaign. I speak very candidly on this show, guys, and I'm going to keep it real. I am tired of just sitting down, idle, going along to get along, and pretending that this stuff is not happening while our communities, our neighborhoods are being sold out to development. Previous to our arrival, we know that the previous administration, where we keep referencing, because guess what? It doesn't feel different in this administration. There is nothing different in this administration but a task force that the old administration didn't do.
Well, we need 5 votes, and we know that, and to garner any change. So let me say this, and anything that is happening or not happening is based on the majority of council. So if something is happening, then the majority of council is making that happen. If something is not happening, then the majority of council, again, is the cause. Now, who is that majority? If we're not getting the policies in place to protect our citizens, that's because we cannot get the majority of council to agree to do certain policy advance. So this is definitely what we're seeing is forced displacement. And it's forced displacement because, and you're looking into these people's face, this is the face of forced displacement, because they do not desire to move. And when people do not desire to move, it's almost a human rights issue. So the president of this nation, how dare he go to China and criticize them? How dare we as Americans criticize any other country about their human rights records when we have people living like on President Street and we putting people out like the people in Clearview? We do not have the moral authority to tell anyone else about the way they are treating their citizens. And the citizens here in Savannah, they're not just the stakeholders, they're stockholders. Our tax dollars tell us that we are the stockholders in this corporation. And if we're not getting an equitable return on our public investment, then we need to look at the board of directors, and that's city council. We need to look at we need to change our board. We need to put some people there that's going to make sure that we get an equitable return on our public investment. And that's in any corporation. When we pay taxes, we look to get some equitable return. We look to get an increase in our quality of life issues, and we're not getting that. So don't just look at this like, oh, we're citizens and and those people are going to do what they want to do, and we don't have any leverage, because when we pay our tax dollars and then you become a stockholder in this corporation called Savannah, there's so many issues. Now we could only make a change through policies, and we need to present that policies. We need to get it on the agenda. We need to get 5 votes, and that is not happening. Look at this council. This council doesn't look like a group of people where people should be getting put out on the street and evicted from their residence. When I got elected, I knew it was going to take policy initiatives to make the changes, and we are using the same strategic plan that the last 5 councils used. And if we follow that same plan, we're going to get the same results. That's why I said, no, we need a new plan. We need a community benefit strategic approach. And folks are like, well, what is that? Well, we need community benefit ordinance that these are all citizen-driven policies. And that will provide us with an opportunity to create community benefit agreements between developers and citizens. We do not have that. So therefore, all of the power and the authority is in the hands of the developers, and the people, the citizens who are being impacted by these developments do not get an opportunity to negotiate for benefits for our communities. That's why we need a community benefit ordinance and a community benefit agreements. I also try to advocate for anti-gentrification exemptions to protect owners, to protect people who live in proximity to these large to these large developments. Of course, we know that the income, the cost of the residents are going to increase. We know that they're going to be impacted because of these developments. So let's protect people by giving them an exemption to freeze their taxes at the levels where these developments won't force them out because of taxes. We need rent control, where people who live in proximity to these developments, their rent won't escalate so high in months or 1 year that it will force them out. We need inclusionary zoning to have these developers set aside X amount of housing that are affordable. So we'll have mixed incomes in these developments, and they won't all be so extreme that low income people or moderate income people couldn't live there. These are policies that we need to put in place. We're working on the impact fees, and thank you for your advocacy on that, Alderwoman Gibson Carter. But then now we have landlords who would not accept vouchers. And that's not just happening in Savannah, it's happening around the country. So we need an ordinance that is anti-income source bias. There's a bias to where that income comes from because it's real income, but people do not want to take those. So we need an ordinance to allow, don't allow that bias, don't allow a landlord to discriminate because my incomes come from a voucher and yours come from your job. You shouldn't be able to discriminate on where someone's income come from.
Right.
So we have to put an ordinance. We need these policies in place to protect people. And all of these have been presented since we got elected to our other city managers, and they just pushed them aside and ignored them. We couldn't get these on the agenda, and you know what we've been up against. But I'm so glad that we have a new city manager who understands these are thought out, best practice, equitable policies that protect people, and he gets it. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation with him. And we are starting to at least get him to recognize and staff to recognize we just weren't trying to be difficult and arguing and trying to have a disgruntled council. We're fighting to change the trajectory of what's been in place in the last 20 years, 30 years in Savannah, because it has not served to help us with our poverty rate. It kept people in poverty. So I would veer to say, Alderwoman, that the city council or city government has been a part of a predatory type gang that has not put the equity policies in place to help its own people, but they have leaned more towards developers. And so we have not entertained smart growth and development. And smart growth and development will be placing these policies in place that are people driven, citizen driven, that will protect the people or the stockholders and stakeholders of Savannah.
And and as I listen to you and digest all of that, I go back to driving around the city in moments where I get literally sick to my stomach. I get nauseous to see the growth and development that is going on around us in some of our established historical neighborhoods and some of the areas that were most vulnerable. And you see these condominiums coming up. You see these apartments coming up, 900 square feet for $2,000 a month. You see the MLK corridor, which was supposed to be designed. A part of one of the plans was to revitalize MLK for Black business. We see people being forced out of the Midtown corridors where you won't be able to afford the market rent because of the apartments that are now being developed in these areas. And the best way I can help people understand what you have laid out for us tonight is to say, just open your eyes when you drive around Midtown, downtown. Before long, it's even going to be the South Side. I think there is a calculated effort to push people who are not in a certain income bracket. I don't even think it's about race.
Correct.
It's about economics.
Economics,
And
absolutely.
one of the things I have been saying as of late is Black elitism is worse than racism. And a big part of the reason why we are in the situation that we're in here in Savannah, we can no longer blame the white man. You know why? Because African American, Black, colored, Negroes have been in leadership in this town in excess of 30 years. And so, how can we blame somebody else for doing what we ourselves are not willing to do for your own people or do for folks who are vulnerable?
And I
We
agree
have
with
poor
you.
whites in this community as well. We have Hispanics,
It's not about
people.
race. Go ahead.
Yes, it's no longer about. And so now we see the selfishness when it comes to the economics when it's broken down in that way. And so what do we do? What do we do? We ask people to pay attention. We ask people to lobby their council members. We ask people to vote and send us into office. And you did a great job sort of breaking down our political process as it relates to getting a decision made. It starts with a policy presentation, and you kind of alluded to a little bit of what we are trapped by, and that is before we came into office in January of 2020, COVID hit in March of 2020. Well,
Yeah.
by February of 2020, we were eclipsing the number of homicide in our community in the previous year. Right now, to date, we probably have already tripled the murder rate in the city from the previous years. And so before we could, or before we attacked the issue related to crime and poverty and responding to some of these issues, we started bonding major corporations in the city. We started establishing tricky rules of council where we have this group of progressive, aggressive individuals who are crazy about the people they serve. Surely we can't have that. So now let's change the rule. We know that we have a manager, a council manager form of government. That means the city manager makes the decisions and calls the shots in our local government. We, as council members and the mayor, have one vote and one equal vote. The mayor is sermonic and essentially the face and voice of the city. That's the
Mhm.
privilege. Outside of that, we as policymakers, not task force members, but as policymakers, what we are supposed to do is introduce legislation problems to our city manager in the form of legislation and say, I represent the first district. Here's what's happening in my community. I need a policy written so that I can present it to council for consideration. We vote on it, it's passed, and the West Side community is living in more harmony. That's how it's supposed to work. But as opposed to allowing us to keep with that standard practice of governing, our mayor in his pocket five, Estella Shabazz was on our side at that time. They decided to change the rule of council to where, no, we can't just present legislation unless we have not just the 5 members who have to vote it up, but you have to have a consensus of 5 to even get it
on the agenda.
To get it on the agenda, to see the light of day. And so here's what we want our citizens to understand. We want you to understand the process. So when Savannah Morning Messy News doesn't get it right, when the TV affiliates don't get it right, you understand it. Because right now, we're not even reporting on the number of crimes that happen in the community. The number of homicides are going underreported. And so we can no longer rely on the faith that you put in people. And here's what happens. People put faith in us because it appeared to be too big of a job, or they have other things to do. They have a job, they have kids. So they put their faith in a person thinking that they are going to perform on their behalf. And when that person that they find faithful doesn't perform, it's really, really difficult to accept that and to deny that. So instead, we just bury our heads and we wait until the next round. But I don't want people to wait to vote folks out of office. We want you to mobilize and engage and make demands to your community. Just like I told the residents of Parkside today, the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior.
Yes.
So if you have a council who has historically voted against the voice of the people, when they say, West Side Coalition, we don't want this landfill expanded, we don't want this development over here. When we say District 1, we don't want the Salvation Army on the Weeping Time property.
Not at all.
We align our votes accordingly. And so Parkside now will be the litmus test. If they say they do not want this development by Wardlaw, who again is a contributor to the mayor's campaign, along with the attorney who's on the project, Yellen, and Hunter McLean, if y'all stop doing it, I'll stop calling you out. But in the interim,
I don't know how much faith I'm going to have that they're even going to listen to those good people, because they tore down that Johnny Harris. And that was, that was a iconic building here, historic, so much history. Everyone loved Johnny Harris restaurant there, the dancing that went on there, the good food, and they tore that down to build a storage building or something. Then after they tore it down, it was like, oh, never mind, we changed our mind.
Right.
I believe we tore down that historic building. And it was like, oh, never mind. But now let me say this: when I'm talking about us, the city having predatory type practices, it's really just systemic, and this is not a racial thing. However, because of the economics and the history of this town, the vulnerable, low wealth people, the most vulnerable, are African American. So that's where the race come into it, because of the history. Now we have these policies that establish these enterprise zones. In the last census, 10,000 African American citizens left Savannah. And if you look where we have these enterprise zones that encourages this development, and we're talking a Farm Street and MLK and Montgomery Street, Waters Avenue, these are the areas that's gentrifying the fastest. So if you're looking for those 10,000 people that were displaced, they're in Pula and Garden City, Fort Wentworth. And now you're going to hear these leaders talking about transportation, push the cat. Yeah, you need that transportation to go get your workers back now.
Right.
You took them out of town, 10,000. Now you want them back in town to make up some beds or whatever. And now you need to make sure that the bus could get out the Pula to bring the people back in town. So
Mm-hmm.
what you hear so much now about cat and getting that
Oh,
cat all the way through all of these little places, because you know what? That's where your workers are now, because you pushed them out there. So this is just crazy. You know, we're talking workforce houses. When we first heard about the new development that was coming for Clearview, and we were introduced to that by Mr. Foreman at that meeting, I'm talking about 3 years ago, we were told that this will not be a low income area. It was not even mentioned that it would be for workforce housing. It was market rate apartments, because there were no government money or no tax credit used or needed. So therefore, there was no obligation to make sure that low income people, or the same people who left there, were able to live there. We were told that this was going to be just a market rate place. So all of a sudden now that all of this attention is on the fact that these low income working class people were living there, now all of a sudden they're saying, well, workforce houses. It's the language, it's the trickery in the language. We were not told anything about workforce anything. This was just market rate, because that's where they were going to make the most money.
mm-hmm.
So that's just another point. But we have to, if we could put a policy in place like an enterprise zone that pushes people out, we could put policies in place that protect people. But we have not done that. We haven't even had an opportunity to create policies. The policies are being made by these task
No.
force, we're just sitting there. And when we're being presented with the findings, we're just asked to vote up or down. We don't have it. We're not saying, well, let's tweak this. We can't say, let's look at this in a cafeteria style, and let's pull that from the task force, because I like that. That makes sense. But my residents over here, they need this. Let's not do that. Let's not put vending machines in the community to give fresh fruit and vegetables through a vending machine. Who wants that? But that's what we're being given, and we don't even have an opportunity to say, well, you know what? I like that part of it, but I don't like that. And we're the elected people. We're the people elected to do just that. But it's been taken away from us, our ability to even make policies for the people we represent.
And that's what I regret so much, because I have seen your work. I've seen your the policies that you put together, and I can only imagine if ever they saw the light of day. I feel like we're a little bit closer now. We would be so much closer. And when you talk about policies for exclusionary zones, we know that we actually have uh, not exactly a policy, but we do have somewhat of an offering via the federal government in opportunity zones. But even in the opportunity zones, we still are not garnering the full benefit, in that we have developers who are building and growing their businesses in opportunity zones and not returning the community benefit, which is required. If you receive a federal subsidy when you develop in an opportunity zone, you are supposed to return to the community some form of a benefit. And it's just not happening.
Well, that was the intent when the opportunity zones were created. The intent was to uplift the area. And when you think the area, how could you uplift the area without uplifting the people? But the Trump administration said that they were going to leave that up to the local governments, who would probably be best suited to create the policies to protect their people. And we haven't done that. And once we get 5 people on council who understand that and support it and will vote for that, it'll probably be too late, because the people will already be gone.
Yes.
And so it's not the development itself, it's the fact that we haven't put the policies in place to empower the people to be able to negotiate for the benefits, and require the developers to make sure that the benefits go back into these communities to truly uplift the people along with the area. Now, of course, opportunity zones just allow for investors to get they could invest for 5, 7, or 10 years, and they do not have to. They could use capital gains in order to invest back into these areas. I don't think it took off as well as what they intended. So now we have an area where we have the development that is the arena and the canal district, and we do not have the policies in place, and that's why I'm recommending the rent control and the anti-gentrification exemptions, and the inclusionary zoning. Of these are policies that once the rest of the area get built out, that will help the people who live near there. But if we don't do these things, they're sure to be priced out of there. They're sure to be pushed out. So we can't have one without the other. And then just to think that I heard this morning that there's a concert coming, I believe it's the Eagles. I love the Eagles, but they're coming to the arena, and the tickets were $700 and some dollars, and now what's left will be scalped for over $1,000. And so I don't believe anyone from any of the abutting communities are going to be
right.
And they didn't get a community benefit agreement that even though they can't afford to go and see the entertainers, at least it should be some monies or some programs or daycare. If anyone wants to know what are community benefits, I'll be glad to share what is a typical best practice community benefits that people should get from these developments. And they're very reasonable. It's just a good collaborative partnership where all of this monies are going into this development that was intended to uplift the area. But we need these policies to make sure, Alderwoman, that could happen. It's not a bad thing in itself. It only becomes bad when we did not do our due diligence to put these policies in place to protect the people.
And I feel like it's our duty to inform the public of how things are playing out, because if you allow the narrative to be framed in a manner of which this government is currently operating, and that's a lot with smoke and mirrors and gaslighting. I consider a lot of what goes on here gaslighting.
Yeah.
You're just leading the people down this dark, smoky road. But we have a tendency to now believe that nothing can happen unless it goes through a task force. But that's as far from the truth. You did not elect task force members. It's good to engage the community. I applaud people who are well-intended and who have joined these task force. I just challenge you to make certain that whatever you are doing is goal-oriented, objective-oriented, timelined. That means a start and a finish. And you have persons responsible so that we have accountability pieces built in, and we just don't have a situation where we're making people popular and making them quasi campaign organizers and, building people up to support your next election bid. Frankly, is what's going on. Once again, we're speaking very candidly as Kesha tonight. And so what we want to do is help our citizens understand and recognize the method and the manner of which our government is supposed to operate. And we want you to take your rightful place within this government. We pledge to give government back to the people and to give you a voice. And I think we have done a pretty good job, because more people are now engaged than ever before. I can't take more than 2 steps in the grocery store without someone actually coming and talking to me about an agenda item, or talking to me about something that occurred at one of the meetings that's substantive to the work that we do. And so I'm proud that we have been able to raise up an electorate who are smarter, who are more knowledgeable, and who do not have to be told and who do not have to be led. They just have to be given access. And so we've opened the doors of City Hall, and we've peeled back the gold off of the dome, and we have invited people into the house. Before we go, I want to remind people that we have Alderwoman Blakely's 38th Street Park End Gun Violence event coming up on December 11th. And we also want to acknowledge that there is a tax sale tomorrow morning, starting at 9 o'clock. Unfortunately, we were not able to stop the tax sale. So if you have received, and that's another thing, Alderwoman Lanier, again, people's property is being sold on the steps tomorrow for as little as back taxes of $700.
Wow.
$700. And I think that the highest amount in arrears is $2,000. And so Um, selling people's property at a time like this, again, when we've received this major bailout in the state, in our city, in our county, I think is just awful. And so what we want to do is, if you are an individual who have a tax issue,
Hmm.
please reach out to Alderwoman Blakely at 912-631-0731. That's 912-631-0731. She gives everybody her personal cell phone number. I can't remember the city one. But reach out to her if your property is on that tax sale for tomorrow. We want to share some information with you on how we can delay that or help you get it paid. We are also excited to announce that we are approaching the season of Kwanzaa Crawl. And so we want to thank all of the restaurants who are participating this year. We know that Kwanzaa is a heritage celebration of African American culture. We want to embrace it. I want to let everybody know that this event came as a result of my concern. This time last year, just like now, we experienced a great number of individuals dying on the streets to gun violence. And almost all of them were African American men and boys. And so, and as much as I was saddened by the fact that they were dying at the hand of gun violence, it grieved my spirit to know that they were taking each other out, right? Um, and I thought, what is it? What is it that doesn't give a person a sense of pride where you would take out another Black brother? Like, what problem do you have, or must you have, or we can't just solve it,
Yes.
right? What is it that you and I go through problematically, and we solve it without a gun? And the one thing that came to me is pride and the knowledge of who they are.
Of self, absolutely.
Pride and self, a knowledge of self.
Mhm.
And if they only knew the struggles and the challenges, some may know it, but they don't recognize it, or they've forgotten it because our culture, our heritage, and so much about us have become so watered down
Mhm.
that we have forgotten. And so we wanted to resurrect somewhat during the pandemic and interject in the lives of African American people who were slipping a little bit, where they were concerned, and say, let's come together, let's embrace each other, celebrate each other. But more importantly, for the participants, we wanted each of them to grab hold to these young men and just educate them and help them understand. And I know this touches you deeply. Your son was a victim of senseless gun violence, and we don't want to lose another life. And I'm very sensitive to this talk when I approach it with you, because I know, no, I don't know. I can only imagine that emptiness that you feel.
It is definitely unspeakable. But I'm very proud of the young man that my son was. He was a scholar. He was artistic. He was very loving, very community minded. But he ran into a person who probably had the opposite qualities, who was, with a gun and alcohol. Um, who was a homeless gentleman on the park, and my son asked him to leave because children are on the park, and he thought he decided to empty his gun, and my son, who asked him to leave the park. So that happened in 2012. So the man that killed my son, these are the boys we need to reach. These are the ones who we have to make sure that are educated, and that we could at a young age put a gentle loving hand on them of guidance, because maybe they didn't get that at home. um, and that's the work in front of us, Alderwoman. I just want to mention also that Representative Derek Marlowe is working on the rent control piece at the state level also. We've been collaborating on that. um, and I also wanted to throw in before we leave that 15 years ago, this city was working on with task force. There were numerous task force in order to document the disparity, document the conditions, and this was under Mayor Otis Johnson. And that council did, he did a great job as a academician of documenting what the situation was. So we know we didn't need to do that all over again. We needed to get to work, and so we 2 years in now, and we did not get to work on the findings that we already had from 15 years ago. We wasted 2 years, and of course the pandemic was upon us. However, we had the information already of what the situation is, and we needed to hit the ground running and move the needle, and we didn't do that. So here we are 2 years in, and we have a good city manager now, very promising young man, and I have a lot of hope in him, bless his heart, with what he has walked into. But I do believe now we had, I do believe, a relatively successful budget workshop, and we got, I can see evidence of our advocacy in the budget, but of course the devil is in the details. So how
Yes.
we administer that budget is going to determine whether we actually are true to what we say we were going to do in serving our people. So now we got to make sure that the culture is tweaked in the city to have our people who have all these years supported um, uh, uh, a city government that was not the kindest to its people, especially the people who are at the lower wealth end, to now coming up with a culture that works hard and dedicate themselves to the people of this city. And we have, it starts at the top. So we have a city manager now that has that kind of outlook, that has a good heart for people, that has a good understanding of how you get this type work done. So we're looking forward to next year in order to be able to meet some of the needs of our citizens, and turn some of this blight and this around. So thank you, Alderwoman, for having me here this evening. And we have a lot of work ahead of us, and
Yes.
you
Oh
have to
my God.
love people, because so many days you want to just throw your hands up in the air and say, you know
Yes.
what? I mean, we're working with spiritual wickedness in high places. And
Hmm.
sometimes you just want to walk away from that. And then someone will walk up to you and say, thank you for what you do. You're doing a
Yes.
good job. And there we go again, just stressed out all over again. So that's what we live with. And that's what
And
serving.
it as much as I say to people, don't thank me for doing the job that I signed up to do. We get paid big bucks to do this work, a whopping $25,000 a year. and and listen, my insurance comes out of mine, so it's like probably doing those out to about $12,000 a year. But we'll take it, right? We'll take it. But truly, it's dedication from the heart, but less than that, more than dedication from the heart. I believe that we've just responded to the call.
Yeah.
We're on assignment and we couldn't leave it if we tried, because we are supposed to be where we are doing exactly what we're doing now. And three things I said I was going to do on a campaign trail, and that was to advocate, to educate, and to serve. And in advocating, that's fighting for things that people deserve in spaces where they are not seen. And in educating, it's not so much telling you what this means or what the definition of that is, but it is sharing information and exposing our citizens to a sector that they ordinarily would not have been exposed to unless I was sitting in this seat. And then by way of serving, that is making myself accessible. I can't think of very many places where we are not. Um, I think between you, Alderwoman Blakely, and myself, we generally make most of what we're supposed to go to. Who remembers? Because again, we're doing all of this and we do not have assistance at all. It was said that we have the secretary and her assistant, but no, they book our travel. And outside of that, and reminding us of to sign up for a class here and there, that's not the same level of support that we should have when it comes to representing the people. If we had that level of support, people would be supported even more. And so I
Absolutely.
say to the citizens of Savannah, you do not owe me thanks. You do not owe us gratitude. However, when it is offered in the midst of these challenging times when we are judged harshly and unfairly, it is certainly appreciated. So we thank you for allowing us to serve. And with that, we're going to say good night. And I know that y'all just don't know how hard I had to work to get Alderwoman Blake Lanier on here tonight. I tell you, this is not
I'm
my
shy.
favorite thing to do. I did not come to City Hall to do Kandily Kesha moments, but because we have to have a platform by which we are able to share and equalize or change the narrative that you hear in the airways. We're so grateful to All Things Relevant Media,
Yeah.
ATR, for extending this platform. And we want to encourage you to tune in to For Us, By Us with Alicia Miller Blakely tomorrow between 7:30-ish or so. And she'll be bringing some of these pieces to life. We want you to keep your eyes on the moving, ever moving project of the fairgrounds as well. Listen, Savannah, we love you and good night. Thank you,
Pray
Alderwoman
for
Lanier.
Clearview. Pray for Clearview.
Yes, please.